Hello everyone, I'm back again to share with you a vision that I had and some words from the 31st of October. Now I know this is a little bit over a month ago, but I have had to pray over this to really understand what the Lord was showing me. And interestingly, it has led me to going through the prodigal son story because he has a message for the church of today through this, I believe. So I'll get straight into it because I've tried this twice now and it keeps stopping midway and not allowing me to proceed. So I'm going to have to skip along, and forgive me if I seem to be hurrying through, but I don't want it to stop on me. So the vision that I saw on that night was, firstly, I saw a gentleman dressed in a white jacket, a cocktail jacket, and he was standing in a room that was very obviously that he was at an event. I didn't see any other people, but the things that stood out in the vision was that his jacket was covered in small rectangular reflective plates that emanated an amazing heavenly light. And the other thing that was odd about this gentleman was he had on his face an expression of sadness. He was upset about something, and it just seemed to be in total contrast with his surroundings and what he was wearing. So that was the first thing I saw, and then I heard the words 2 sons, and immediately after that I saw another man, and this young man was had long wavy fair hair. He was dressed very plainly compared to the other son. And his expression on his face also stood out in the vision. His face had an expression of surprise, as if he was saying, "Oh!" And then I heard the words, "lost weight, wasted." And that was the end of the vision. Now, I prayed over this for several nights to really understand just who the 2 sons were. And the first thing that came to mind was the prodigal son story, but I also thought of Esau and Jacob, and I just prayed and prayed to the Lord to help me understand why they had those expressions on their face and why the white jacket. And I have been led very definitely back to the prodigal son story, and I just want to very quickly skip over this story because I know a lot of you will know it well. But I believe the Lord has shown us these things for a reason. Now this story is in Luke 15, and the first verse of the story says this: "Then he said," this is Jesus speaking, "a certain man had 2 sons. Just as I heard that night, I heard 2 sons. And then quickly just describing the story, the younger brother wanted to have his share of the inheritance. He asked his father to divide the inheritance, and he went off and he squandered the money. He wasted it on women and wine and many other things." And then I'll just take you to verse 14, and it says, "But when he had spent all, there arose a severe famine in the land, and he began to be in want. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything." And that made me think of the words the Lord gave me: lost weight and wasted. He wanted us to understand that that second son, who was dressed plainly, was the younger son in the prodigal son story. He was starving. He had wasted his money, and he had no food. And all he could think of was that he would go back to his father and see if he could be hired as a servant so that he would at least have food. In verse 18, I think, is a key verse. It says, "I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants." Now, everyone, I think why the Lord showed me this younger son with the expression of "oh" on his face was that he was surprised, because when he went back to his father received him with open arms, with love and joy. And he was surprised. He didn't expect his father to be so welcoming. And the father killed a beast and had a party for him. And there we get back to the event, the party, and the first son. And the reason he was wearing the white jacket. And just bear with me as I explain this to you. I believe the son in the white jacket was unhappy because he, as the story tells us, was very put out that his father would hold a party for the young son who had done so much wrong and just wasted his father's money. He felt it wasn't fair. Why hadn't the father held a party for him? I'll just read a couple of verses. So in verse 31, the father is saying to his older son, he said to him, "Son, you are always with me, and all that I have is yours. It was right that we should make merry and be glad, for your brother was dead, and he is alive again. He was lost, and he is found." So I believe that the father wanted to stress to the son that it is so important to celebrate when somebody comes back who is repentant and comes back to the fold, back to the family. And this is the crux of this story. What I believe the Lord was saying was the man in the white jacket was the church. And we all know that the church, not all of the church, but some parts of the church, a certain percentage of those in the church are very unforgiving and have a very judgmental attitude to those that have gone away from the Lord, have done wrong, who have sinned, who have pretty much said they don't want to be Christians anymore, and then they realize they're wrong, they repent, and they turn back to the Lord. And some people believe that the Lord would not receive them back. That once you've walked away from the Lord, you're not going to be received back. I think the Lord has shown us this parable to remind us as a church that He is delighted. He wants to celebrate when one of His children repents and comes back to Him. And the other thing He wants to remind us is that those of the church that stay loyal to the Father, who don't sin, and who do their best to always serve Him, they are always with the Lord. He has dressed them in bright raiment, and this is where the jacket comes to play. And I've got some scriptures and Revelations I just want to touch on. Okay, so this is Revelations 3, and I'm starting at verse 4. And I apologize for the poor light, but it's because I'm doing this in the night hours. So in verse 4 it says, "You have a few names even in Sardis, who have not defiled their garments, and they shall walk with me in white, for they are worthy. He who overcomes shall be clothed in white garments, and I will not blot out his name from the book of life, but I will confess his name before the Father and before his angels." So in Revelations, Jesus was speaking of the people in the church of Sardis who had remained faithful to Him, and He said that the Lord would dress them in white garments, and He would confess them before the Father, and their names would be written in the book of life and not be taken out. So the older son in the white jacket had a place of privilege, but he didn't realize just how wonderful it was to wear that jacket, what a privilege it was to wear the white garment, and how special he was to the father. There was no need to feel jealous of the younger son, because he already had a place of privilege with the father. And so I think with this whole vision and the Father teaching us more from this parable is just to remind the church not to be jealous, not to be unforgiving, but to welcome those that come back into the fold, that we should be looking for them and we should be helping to receive them, not forgetting that we already have such a place in the Father's heart. There is no need for jealousy. We are treasured by the Father. Now, brothers and sisters, just a quick testimony of my own. I was a Christian for many, many years, decades, and then my marriage fell apart, and I was so devastated that I did walk away from the Lord for probably about 3 or 4 years, and I did things that I had never in my life done. I was confused. I didn't know where the goalposts in my life were. I just was lost, literally, like the youngest son. And I didn't think that the Lord would ever take me back. I felt just like the younger son, that if I ever was received back into the Father's kingdom, I remember thinking this, that I would only be worthy to scrub the floors of heaven. And that is literally the thought I had. So, brothers and sisters, my personal testimony is this, that the Lord, once I repented, once I went to somebody that I knew I had to say sorry to, the Lord gently and beautifully brought me back into his arms of love. And he has blessed me with so many good things, and I am surrounded by a sense of his love, and he has blessed me with this wonderful gift of sharing things with you all. So I just want to testify to the goodness and the love and the forgiveness of the Father. And I am very grateful that he has brought this whole story back to us. So I hope that I've brought this to you clearly and helped to make an old story renewed for you. And I hope it will be a blessing. And just to be reminded that we need to be patient, we need to be forgiving, and open our arms to those that are coming back to the Father, and rejoice with the Father and the Son. God bless you all.